my name is Anneliese Delgado, member of Palm Lake Christian Church, and I'm here with Brian Evjen. He's the president of New Star Development. Palm Lake Christian Church and New Star are partnering to have an affordable housing initiative that has been in the works for several years now. And right now, we're at the process where this proposal needs to be approved by City Council, and there'll be a public hearing on March 2nd to discuss this proposal. Now, Brian, thank you so much for joining us today. I have some questions for you that I'm hoping that we can dig in, learn more about this initiative, and learn why it's so important to the St. Petersburg community. So you have experience developing affordable housing communities all throughout Florida. Tell me why specifically this community could be beneficial to St. Petersburg.
Well, first, thank you for having me, Anneliese. It's a pleasure to be here. Nice to meet you. Yes, my firm specializes in developing affordable housing, and we have completed developments throughout Florida. Specifically, we specialize in partnering with other nonprofits like Palm Lake Church. Typically, when we come into a community, well, first of all, I guess I should back up a little bit. It's well documented and well known that there is a severe lack of affordable housing across the state. There's a critical need for affordable housing, and particularly in Pinellas County, a county that's for the most part built out, there is really a lack of affordable housing, and many members of the workforce find themselves priced out. They are often forced to buy or rent property that's very far away, and they deal with commutes that cause other issues. So the state recognizes this need. The state has passed a statute that allows affordable housing to be developed on multiple zoning districts where it would not have been possible before, and that is in recognition of this critical need for affordable housing. And that state statute is what gave rise to the City of St. Pete ordinance, under which we have applied for a site permit for this particular development. So the city obviously recognizes this need as well. When we develop affordable housing communities, we often have wait lists of applicants that are hundreds of lines long before we ever open. And that really speaks to the need and the desirability of these communities. We work with our partners to recognize what their resources are, how they fit into their communities and their neighborhoods, and we do the best job we can of trying to shape our developments to fit with the character of each neighborhood.
Great, okay. And this particular community, if passed by City Council, is going to be called Palm Lake Urban Sanctuary, or PLUS. And we've received a lot of questions, both from the church community, the neighbors, the St. Petersburg community at large, specifically about who is going to manage PLUS if it actually gets built. Talk to us a little bit more about that. Is it the church who's going to be managing the day-to-day process, like approving residents to actually live in that community?
No, the church will not be managing this community. We will be utilizing financing that is mostly made up of low-income housing tax credits. It's a federal tax credit program, and the state of Florida has an agency that allocates those credits, that we end up selling the tax credits to private investors. But one of the conditions of receiving those tax credits is we have to use a pre-approved property management firm. We have to identify that firm in our application for the funding. We have an affiliate property management firm that we work with on our developments, and there are other firms available throughout Florida that have experience managing these communities as well.
So following that subject on community management, talk to us about the application process for the residents.
Sure. So part of our credit underwriting, when we are in the development process, we are required to draft and submit a tenant selection process document. And on top of that, once the development is up and running, our property management team has to keep very detailed records because they are audited on a regular basis. We have to keep records that show that we have certified residents' income so that they qualify as affordable housing residents. that they meet the age restrictions or the demographic requirements, things like that. But in addition to that, part of the tenant selection process at the application point is it involves a substantial screening. We screen for felonies and violent crimes, and we also screen for previous financial issues that led to eviction or behavioral issues that led to eviction. So there's some heavy screening prior to anyone ever moving into the property.
Okay, great. And we've heard this concern not just from neighbors here in this community, but all throughout the country when people are talking about affordable housing. Neighbors are concerned that creating an affordable housing community could make property values go down. What does the research say about that?
Good question. And we've heard that concern before. There are multiple studies that have proven initially the focus was on blighted communities, communities that were in decline, that were being redeveloped. And obviously in those communities, affordable housing can be a catalyst for redevelopment. It can be the first redevelopment and be a sign that things are turning around, and it can kind of spark other redevelopment in the surrounding community. But more recently, there have been studies that have focused more on higher income neighborhoods. And as recently as 2021, there was a new study by the Urban Institute that found that these developments also increase property values in higher income neighborhoods. If you drive by a market rate apartment complex and affordable housing complex, you're not going to be able to tell the difference. And in many cases, our developments are more expensive than market rate developments, just because of all the requirements that are placed on these communities by the tax credit allocation agency, as well as requirements from our investors and our lenders. So the per unit cost is actually higher, and they tend to hold their value very well.
Okay. And you were talking about driving by. The plan is to create 72 units, a 3-story building. If someone's driving by, should they be anticipating traffic snarls or what kind of traffic implications does this project have?
So part of our application process with the City of St. Pete was to go through a review by the engineering department, the city engineering department. They gave us some feedback on the initial plan that was related to parking and traffic management. We've made those changes, and the city's engineers have actually performed a traffic study that will be presented at the hearing, and they have found that there will be no significant impact to the neighborhood traffic patterns.
Okay, that's great to know. I'm also wondering more about the target residents. So we know that this affordable housing community would be housing people who have disabilities or who are low-income earners. But we've been hearing people who have concerns that the target resident would be someone who is perhaps addicted to drugs or who has severe mental illness issues. Talk to us about the target resident for this community.
So the disabled component is one option for this community. There are multiple ways to apply for the tax credits I mentioned earlier, and one of those applications requires a set-aside that requires 50% of your residents to be disabled. There are other funding options, and we've looked at another one that would simply focus on seniors, either age 55 and up or age 62 and up. But as far as the drug use and the mental illness, the definition of disabled, and I'm going to have to check my notes here because I don't remember all these details off the top of my head. But there is a definition of disabled that is included in the funding application, and you have 4 options to choose from, and we have actually developed these communities before with the same funding source. And the one that we've discussed with the church is adult persons requiring independent living services in order to maintain housing or develop independent living skills, and who have a disabling condition that currently impairs or is likely to impair physical mobility. There is a separate and completely different funding application that addresses mental illness. It's called developmental disabilities as opposed to disabling conditions. And I know that's a lot of detail, but that's just the way that these developments are targeted. And so we have specifically chosen physical disabilities as opposed to mental disabilities, mostly just because our management company has the capacity to manage that population and not the other population. It's a little bit more specialized. That
makes sense. Thanks for clearing that up. All right, let's talk about what happens after this project is complete. There are people who are concerned that Palm Lake could sell off the property or could be making money, or property would be shifting hands. So can you dive into that and tell us more about that?
Sure. Well, first of all, Palm Lake will not be selling the property. Part of the benefit to us for these developments when we work with nonprofit partners is their tax-exempt status. So we typically, and I think the church prefers this as well, the church will retain the ownership of the land. They will ground lease a portion of the property here at the main campus for this development. And that ground lease goes to a partnership that will include both the church and New Star and a limited partner who will be the investor. So that ground lease will have a term of at least 50 years, and that is because the tax credits carry a requirement that we execute a deed restriction to keep this development as affordable housing for 50 years. So any concerns about selling to a different developer or a different property owner who wants to convert it to market rate, those concerns are essentially unfounded until year 50 or after. And even then, many of these places are incentivized to remain affordable.
Okay. And a lot of times when people are discussing affordable housing, the word subsidized gets thrown around a lot. In this case, would this project be subsidized by the federal government?
No. So I did reference earlier that these tax credits are federal tax credits. However, there are no federal funds that come into the development financing. Those credits are sold to a private investor, and typically it may be a bank or an insurance company or another business that is using those credits to offset other income. And those investors, they buy the credits and they contribute their capital based on milestones during development. The closing, then the construction completion, and then the lease up, and then when we get our final IRS document 2 or 3 years later. So they stay in, and they stay in through the 15-year compliance period as well. So they have a highly vested interest in the long-term viability and the long-term value of these properties.
Makes sense. Okay. Thank you so much for talking with us today. Do you have anything to add or to wrap up, or anything else you would like the church members or the community members as a whole to know about this project?
I would just say that the term affordable housing has kind of developed a stigma, and unless you really know what it means, I think you're kind of operating on stereotypes, and I think that's very unfortunate. But for a development like this, we will be committing to maintain 100% of the units as affordable, and that definition means residents earning at or below 60% of the area median income. And for Pinellas County, for a single resident, that would be $34,500. And for a family of 2, it would be $39,420. So the rent for a 1-bedroom would be $924. And the rent for a 2-bedroom would be $1,108. So that is what's defined as affordable in Pinellas County, but I would imagine a lot of the neighbors would not necessarily agree that that's all that affordable. The rents in Pinellas County and around Florida have increased exponentially over the last few years, and there just aren't a lot of options, when you look around for market rate apartments. So these are called affordable, but they're not overly affordable. So these are residents who will be paying rent, they will be working, and I just think it's unfortunate to attach a stigma to these residents as if they will be living on the dole or not productive members of society. So.
Yeah. Everyone needs a safe, affordable place to live.
Agreed.
Brian, thank you so much for talking with us today.
Thank you.